Um, I want to start with a quick story. I'm going to ask you to do something, okay? As I greet you and I thank the beautiful folks who have invited me here. I want to start with a small story from my world. I'm from West Africa. I don't live there, but I was born there. And there's a story that we used to tell, and our parents sent us to sleep with, right? I want to share with you that story. Is it okay? All right. If it's okay, just wave your hands in the air and wave them like you just don't care. No, not this, like this, like this. Hip hop style. Some people did this. It's all right. It's about the tortoise. And in our folkloric traditions, we call the tortoise Ijakba. And it's one of our trickster figures. Does Finland have tricksters in your folklores? Can you name one of them? Just say that. Tontu. Okay, so you said one? The fox is also a trickster here? Okay, good. So tricksters abound in cultures around the world. The tortoise is one of our famous tricksters. Always up to no good, right? Always doing mischievous, stubborn things. One day, the tortoise decided, you know what? I want to figure out everything. Everything. And the gods leaned into that moment and said, that's an impossible thing, but we will allow you and permit you this impossible quest. So go ahead and do what you want to do. And so he bought for himself a calabash. You know what a calabash is? It was like a gourd with a thin neck, right? Do you know the story? Some of you may know the story. Oh, you don't? Yes, thank you. So he took this gourd and tied it around his neck, put it in front of him, and went to every place he could imagine to get knowledge. It was just like Google before Google, right? He went to the lion and extracted from the lion what makes the lion, and he took it and put it in his gourd. And then he went to Finland and extracted from Finland what makes Finland, and he put it in his gourd, which would be something that you know that I don't, right? He went everywhere. He went across dimensions. He went to the sun, to materials, to Daniel. He got everything into that gourd. Somehow he put it in there. And now came the problem of how to archive this impossibly weighted knowledge. Where to put it? Where do you store it? There are no data centers. So where do you put all of this stuff? And so he decided to put it up on a tree. Now we have those sacred, noble trees called the Iroko tree. It's tall, it's ancient, it's elderly, it's prestigious. And so this tree was right there in front of him. And he said, I'm going to hang it up and masquerade it among the leaves and put it up there. The thing about that is that the tortoise's limbs are quite abbreviated, to put it mildly, and so he couldn't quite wrap his arms around the tree to climb up the tree and store and archive his knowledge. So he had a real problem on his hands, right? And so he kept on going, trying again and again to climb up the tree. It wasn't happening. The stupidest of animals in our folklore is the grasshopper. I'm not sure why it's the stupidest, but we say in our stories, there are many iterations of this story. In one iteration, the stupidest animal is the grasshopper, which happened to be nearby in that moment and was just looking at the tortoise for the umpteenth time, try to climb up this impossible tree. And the tortoise, or the grasshopper, was laughing loudly. And then he hopped out of his hiding place and said to the tortoise, you see, you could do this if you just put the gourd that's in front of your chest behind. See if that works. And he hopped away. That's it. And the tortoise realized how utterly ironic that moment was. Here he was with the chat GPT of all knowledge hanging on his chest right there. He had everything to know about everything. And it was right there. He had it. He had power. He had the Google's data centers all right there in his hands, in his abbreviated limbs. And he didn't know how to climb the tree. It took the stupidest animal to tell him what to do. And so he put it behind, and with great embarrassment, climbed the tree eventually and decided, I'm not going to archive this. I think it's a failed enterprise. So he released all the knowledge back into the world, and that's how Finland became Finland. Right? If he trapped it in there, you wouldn't know what to do with yourselves, is what I'm trying to say. But it's also how I want to introduce the idea that wisdom is not archived knowledge. I think wisdom is what happens when we've come to the end of everything we know. When we've gathered everything and it still is inadequate to the moment. When we've reached the end of all we know, that's when wisdom thrives. Wisdom is an eruption in the field of epistemology. Wisdom is that which doesn't fit. It's the monster that comes in the shape of a stupid grasshopper that tells you what to do with all you think you have. We're here today in the tradition of wisdom. I'm not here to teach you stuff you probably don't already know. I'm not here to dance in the wisdom or the practices of the master who knows it all, to be the sage on the stage. I'm here in the tradition of the stupid, to play with the grasshopper, to embrace that which is still emerging from the cracks of everything we thought we knew and still wants to be shared and stayed with. I'm here in the tradition of the griot, the crack bean, or the trickster, to invite something else that we don't even know the name of, or the language. I don't know the name of it, you don't know the name of it, but it's the staying with that is the invitation here. And I'd like us to ritualize, ceremonialize, mark wisdom's emergence. That no tradition, and I know that this is kind of provocative to say, we speak about wisdom traditions, but tradition by default is always archived knowledge. Wisdom slips away from archival process. Wisdom slips away from being known fully. Wisdom is eruption. Wisdom is emergent. So I want to invite us to do something to mark that emergence, to name the wild God that might pass through our midst. And that is, if you can, stand up to your feet. If you can, stand up to your feet. If you can, stand up to your feet. This is a shocking ritual that should stay in this room. Please don't tell anyone about it. I'm not even joking. Don't tell anyone about it. You know that saying about what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? What happens in Helsinki stays in Helsinki. It must not leave this room. If you tell anyone about this, you will die. Not kidding. You will die, okay? So this is the ritual. It is an ancient ritual, all right? I'd like you to turn to and find 3 people and give them a hug. That's the ritual. And welcome them into wisdom's embrace. Don't tell them. It's only 3 people, not 4 people. If you do 4, you will die. If you do 2, you will get sick. Only 3 people. Give them a good hug and say you're welcome here. I know Finnish people like to hug. Only 3 people. Only 3 people. 3. How was that? Was that good? Is it good? Does it feel good? I always like to start that way. People think I'm about to drop some indigenous secret, and I'm like, ooh, this is a sacred moment, and I tell them to hug. It's no less sacred to meet each other in that way. So I thank you for indulging my playfulness. But we're here in, I can't pronounce this yet. Puistokatu. Did I get it? Yep. Puistokatu. The subtitle is the place of science and hope. The space for science and hope. And hope happens to be what I'd like to talk about today in the time that we have together, which is a short, all too brief moment. I want to start with this beautiful story, but maybe I should start in this way, that I watched the greatest movie of all time recently. Who can guess what that movie might be? For 10,000 euro, which will come from the pocket of Daniel, obviously. Not me, I'm the Nigerian. I'm not giving you any money. I'm taking all your money. Is it what? No, is that a recent movie? It's a recent movie, and I came away with, and I'm not very hyperbolic or theatrical or histrionic, but I came away with the impression that I just watched the greatest movie of all time. For me, it was my greatest, deepest cinematic moment. It's a new movie. It's still going around. There you go. The Odyssey. Anyone watched it? Okay, some of you have watched it. And shall I spoil it for you, tell you what happened? There were men in the horses. In the horse, not in the horses. Christopher Nolan's Odyssey was a beautiful moment for me. I watched it in Belfast in Northern Ireland on an IMAX screen. And I remember I was the only one left with my friend who brought me there, Gareth. I was the only one left. We were the only ones left after it ended. He was sobbing, I was sobbing, and we just sat there. And the people who were cleaning the place had to wait, right? Because everyone else had left, and they just waited for us. I was struck silent by that experience. And of course, you know that it's a Homerian classic. It was written around the 8th century or the 7th century, I can't remember, BCE. And it's a story of hope. It's a story of traveling and trying to get home under extreme circumstances. And it speaks to us because we kind of identify with the Odyssean myth. We want to get home, except that home often becomes exile, doesn't it? And all the moral promises of arrival turn out to become something we didn't quite expect. And along the way, there are siren songs and women turning men into pigs and monsters and cyclops. It's all the ways that we are embraced by a post-humanist world that is stranger than our languages can accommodate, right? But you know, along with that story is an even more prestigious, I would say, story from Hesiod, written around 700 BC, written not on the ways we think about authoriality today. Hesiod wrote the story of Pandora's jar. It's not a box, sorry. They mistranslated it as box, but it was a jar. Do you know the story of Pandora, right? Quick account of this story. It started with Prometheus. Prometheus was a titan who sided with the Olympians. Stop me if you know this one. And I hope I'm not spoiling this story as well, right? It's been there for thousands of years. Prometheus is a titan. He sides with Zeus, but he likes humans, right? And Zeus is not too fond of you people, right? And Prometheus has a soft spot for us. And so he sneaks fire to us, right? There's a longer story here, but the short of it is that he gives us fire. And Zeus does not like that at all. He does not like humans. His development is distaste for human beings. And so instead of just wishing away the moment, he punishes Prometheus. We'll get back to why he punishes him or how he punishes him. We'll talk about that subsequently. But Prometheus, whose name means forethought, has a brother named Epimetheus, which means before thought. So his brother doesn't give a lot of thought to things, right? Prometheus thinks about things beforehand. The brother, not quite so. Zeus wasn't finished with punishing humans. And so he fashioned, with another god called Hephaestus, he fashioned a woman named Pandora. And he sent Pandora to Epimetheus. And Prometheus warned his brother, if Zeus sends you a gift, don't take it. But Epimetheus has other plans. He doesn't think about stuff. And so he takes the gift. And Pandora comes with a jar, not a box, a jar, right? A pithos. He comes with a jar. She comes with a jar. And because of the curiosity that is imbued in her body, she opens this jar, and out comes everything that activists have been worried about for years. Out comes everything that Daniel stays up late to try to fix. Out comes all the things that the foundations here are pouring millions of whatever currency you're pouring are trying to fix. Ageism, sexism, racism, genocide, climate action, all of that, pandemics, it comes out of Pandora's jar. Except the one thing. You know what that thing was? Everyone together? Anyone? Hope. Elpis. Hope. Translated as hope, but not quite so. But Elpis, hope, was staying there. Because we live in a largely westernized, Christianized world, the interpretation of that moment was that hope was the antidote to all the evils that had escaped the jar, right? But an upcoming philosopher called Friedrich Nietzsche, had other ideas. He felt hope was just as much an evil as those things that had escaped, right? I've had moments when, to myself, I've thought, what did Elpis look like? What did hope look like in a jar as a material form? Have you ever thought that? Maybe it's nerds that think this kind of stuff, but I'm a nerd. So have you ever had a moment where you think, what was Pandora looking at in the box or in the jar? What form did it take? What does Elpis look like if we could hold it with our hands? I have a thesis that Elpis is much more common and ordinary than we think. In fact, I have a surprise for you today. And Daniel doesn't know this, and no one else knows this, and I don't know it as well. But I brought Elpis with me. Right here in my bag, y'all thought that this was a laptop. It's not a laptop. Your security systems allowed me to sneak in the last Pandoran evil. It's right there. I'm going to show you what Elpis looks like. Okay? But before I tell you what Elpis looks like, I'm going to give you 3 brief examples to contextualize why this is Elpis and how I found it. Okay? In 1938, there was a young 28-year-old scientist named Roy Plunkett in the United States. He was working at the DuPont lab, and he was working on refrigerants, right? And he accidentally created a chemical called PTFE. Does anyone know what that is? Does anyone know what that is? Daniel, don't say anything. Does anyone else know what that is except Daniel, the annoying student in front who is raising his hand, saying, me. Like me, I used to do that. PTFE, it's polytetrafluoroethylene. That's the long form of the name. You might know it as Teflon. And it's a highly resistant chemical that is everywhere. It's bonding with your cooking utensils, with laboratory equipments, is everywhere. It's so everywhere-ish that it's now in your body. It's in water. There are documentaries that I know. I know a documentary filmmaker from my time as a professor in Macalester College that I sat with and is making a documentary about how it's being produced today. Teflon is how we preserve things. Teflon is how we cook and it doesn't stick. And we buy it and we say it doesn't stick. It's a non-stick pan, but it's poisoning our bodies. It's poisoning the air. It's poisoning water. But when Roy Plunkett discovered it, it was huge in 1938. And it became so ubiquitous that it's now part of our bodies, right? Second story, 1951. A black woman in the United States named Henrietta Lacks walks into Johns Hopkins Hospital and dies. Cervical cancer. She has a cancer. Without her permission, as is usually the case when it comes to black bodies, the doctor scraped some of those cells and noticed something impossible about those cells. Do you know what it is? Has anyone heard of Henrietta Lacks? You've heard of Henrietta Lacks. something impossible about those cells was that they were proliferating endlessly. No other human cells that had been observed could do that. Those cells became HeLa. So it's HeLa, a line of cells that is at the root of all laboratory testing today, at the root of vaccine proliferation, at the root of medicines, at the root of everything. When a lab is using human cells to test and experiment with stuff, they're using Henrietta's cells, a black woman's cells from 1951 who died of a cancer, right? And whose body is still making itself years after she died. Millions. She's grown the size of a huge giant now. And if you've taken a vaccine at any time beyond COVID, if you've taken a vaccine at any point in your life, you have Henrietta to thank for that. This woman whose body was used against her consent to make medicine possible since the 50s. The third story I want to tell you to exemplify what's happening here is back to Prometheus. Prometheus's punishment was terrible and terrifying. This titan was tied to the side of a mountain at the end of the world. And his punishment, does anyone know this punishment? Greek myth? Okay, good. During the daytime, a giant bird named Caucasus, or something like that, would swoop in and eat the side of his body, his liver, right? And at night, it would grow back out again. And in the morning, it would come again and eat the liver. And because Prometheus can heal, it would come, eat it, and by night it would heal all over again. Now, if all of us in this room were to go on an excursion, right, and climb the side of that mountain with, what's your name, brother? Manuel. Manuel leads the expedition. And we're all climbing. He can climb. You do mountain climbing. Just say yes. He does mountain climbing, right? And he's climbing the side of the mountain. And we notice that this guy, Prometheus, is still incarcerated there. Well, he isn't. Hercules famously saved him, but after 30,000 years of incarceration. Let's say he's still there. And we start to notice that he's bleeding from his side. And everyone wants to call 911, or what do you call in Finland? 112. We all want to call 112. No, we'll be in Greece, so it won't be 112. Whatever is the health emergency line there, we want to call it. But we notice at the same time, he's healing. And we start to congratulate him. Like, oh, you're getting better. It's fine. It's fine. He would spit in our faces. Why? Because he knows his healing is part of his incarceration. He would prefer death in that moment because the macabre punishment of Zeus was that his healing will keep him tethered and shackled to that mountain. Death would be a preferable option for Prometheus. I've told you 3 accounts. Roy Plunkett and Teflon, Henrietta Lacks, whose cells were not lacking, right? Whose cells are part of our bodies now, and Prometheus. What do those 3 things have in common? If you can notice hidden connections between things. What do those things, what conversation are they having between each other? Eternity. Who else? Thank you. Anyone else? I think that suffices. A foreverness, an eternity, something that proliferates, something that doesn't want to end. In my view, that is Elpis. That is the thing that was in the jar. It's this object that refuses terminality, that refuses compostability, that insists on proliferating itself like a cancerous cell, like an extractive thing. So I brought it here today. This object is the intersection of Prometheus and Henrietta Lacks and Roy Plunkett in 1938. Oh, it's not here, sorry. It's in the other zip. Am I building good suspense? I wish I had a drum roll moment, but I stole this somewhere. I'm not sure who I'll give it back to. This object that I found in my beautiful apartment, I will live here so awkwardly, is the intersection of all of those stories. It's laboratories, it's biopolitics, it is Teflon, it is the insistence on perpetuity and continuation. It's Elpis. Elpis has always been around us. Elpis produces objects like this. Elpis tells us never to die. Elpis is extraction. Elpis is cancer. When people ask me today, what is hope? How do you think about hope? There are many ways in contemporaneous discourse that we frame and produce hope. We talk about hope as therapeutic necessity, as a spiritual practice, as a political virtue, as something we ought to do. We need hope. Some dude famously ran on the idea of hope in the United States, right? Yes, we can, became this foraging, this idea that we should hope. Hope is something we need to move by or to move with or to get through the next moment. And there's something beautiful about that. But at the same time, we are here not because of all we know, if you notice how I started. We're here to stay with the troubling inadequacies of all we know or all we think we know. Because there is a sense in which hope incarcerates us to the familiar. There is a sense in which hope shackles us to all we have already known and puts us in a participatory field that maintains a form of accommodation. What do I mean by accommodation? I will take another quantum leap to the side and tell you a quick story from the Yoruba people of how everything, including Finnish people, came to be, okay? I'm kidding about that. Of course, you have your own beautiful origin mythologies. But to the Yoruba people, we don't care. Everything came from a chicken, okay? And a spider's web and a calabash. It always has to do with a calabash. The long and short of the story is that a god descended from the sky and he had with him a calabash full of sand. And the world was nothing but water, right? And so he came with this sand and poured the sand on the water, and it made a giant lump of sand. Just this one piece of solidity in an ocean of liquidity, right? And then he deployed the chicken. We should give our thanks to all chickens everywhere because there would be no continents without chickens. And so this huge white chicken gets to work and starts to do this, right? And all the stuff that is flying everywhere becomes Europe and the Americas and Africa. This is how continents were born in our stories. What's important about this idea is the idea of pouring. And this is what I want you to focus your mind on. That our bodies, our lives, the things we take as usual, the things we take as ordinary, are a kind of pouring. We kind of think of it as already there. I am already myself, you're already yourself. What we fail to acknowledge is that we are processes. We are practices of maintenance, right? And this maintenance is not us doing the maintenance. It's the world. Modernity maintains you, maintains your identity. The world is a practice, not a collection of things. The world is a practice. Think about all the ways you are yourself. If I could delete an aspect of your memory, you would not be able to be yourself much longer, right? If I were to ask you, how do you maintain yourself? What are the rituals or processes that make you you? We would sit with you going to the shopping mall, or you going to the groceries, or you using your ID card. How many of you have passwords you remember? How many of you use other things to remember your passwords for you? Like a notepad or your phones. I know sir, what's your password? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Some of you have passwords that are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's or a mnemonic device, or you have it stored somewhere, right? Psychologists speak about embodied cognition for a reason. They're trying to signify that you are a practice. You're a practice of objects and technologies and tools. You're an assemblage, not a thing, right? And these things are constantly woven together in a way that might seem obvious, but is never quite so, right? This is what I think of as an accommodation. An accommodation is all the flowing practices that make the world intelligible, including concepts, ideas, identities. Modernity is an accommodation. It helps us think that we are individuals, that we are isolated selves, and this isolation makes us feel that we are masters of our destinies, that we can be righteous people, that we can be good people, right? And in doing so, it hides all the ways that the world is beyond translation, to use the words of my siblings this afternoon, beyond scrutiny. How many of you care about environments and ecologies and helping the world become a better place? Let me see your hands up. Yes, I knew everyone. There's no one that will be like, not me, right? Everyone does, at least we say we do, right? Do you know about the Congolese children who dig into mines and extract cobalt, which is now the resource to help us have communications and phones and all of that? You know that story, right? Now, let me ask you one more question. How many of you have phones here? Right. So you know that, but you still use your phones. It doesn't mean you're not good or a bad person. It's the way modernity accommodates us by chasing away paradox so that we can have a semblance of sanity, right? And I'm telling you this story of accommodations because I want to make a point here, a meandering poetic point. My point is hope is part of the dynamics of how an accommodation enlists your participation so that you can keep on doing what we know how to do. Okay? This is not anti-hope. I'm not an anti-hope philosopher. I'm noticing how hope can be part of the furniture that keeps us in the stadium of participation, right? Because I fly all the time, I notice the strange rituals and temporary sociality of airplanes, right? Whether I'm flying business class or not, I'm constantly thinking about how airplanes are a temporary society, right? And how we have class structures, even in planes, right? How they seem to be nicer in business class than in economy class, right? Stuff like that happens, and I'm always thinking about that. I'm thinking about the carousel, I'm thinking about airport rituals and dynamics. But one certain ritual, which I've been in conversation about with my brother here, Daniel, has been this ritual of bracing. You know what that is, right? Just before the airplane takes off, this safety video comes on screen. They've been becoming very more cinematic of late, right? Kevin Hart is in one, The Rock is in another. You know, it's all crazy now. But the video tells you that when you experience turbulence of the extreme variety, to do something, to do three things actually, to brace, brace, brace. And you know what bracing is to adopt a posture as to increase your chances of survival if the plane should do something crazy, right? I think bracing is a kind of crisis, is a kind of posture that the plane requires. I want to extrapolate that to society as a whole, that modernity is the mechanization of bodily postures, the creation of postures to meet a crisis. And this creation of the posture is just like the creation of the bracing posture. Bracing needs justification. Bracing is hope, right? Bracing is what hope looks like on an airplane. What does hope look like in ordinary life? It's what we do on the daily. It's how we imagine that the next political savior will come from this party or that party. It's how we think that philanthropic modalities might save the day. It's how we imagine that anti-capitalism might someday rule against capitalism, or anti-racism will get rid of racism. I'm thinking of all the ways that hope engineers participation, so that we keep on doing the same things over and over again. You cannot hope in what you don't know how to name. And modernity is the paradigm of fixed names. An animal species, and I know there's an entomologist in the house who studies ants, but a certain ant species does a very strange thing. It's called a death spiral. Has anyone here heard of a death spiral? You have, I know, you have. Maybe should I tell the story since everyone has heard about it? Okay, 5 people in the room have heard about it. A death spiral is a very strange thing. I'm not sure how it comes to be, but it's like a pheromonic accident of some kind. You know that ants secrete semiochemicals from their butts, I think. And these chemicals are like a GPS system, right, that tells them, turn left. Well, not exactly in that way, but the ants find that they are able to move through complex geographical circumstances because of their chemicals. And they're able to find their way back to home because of that. But then some accidents happen, and they fall into a loop. And the ants start to go around in a circle. They just keep going around in a circle, an endless circle. And these circles have been observed to be as large as a football stadium. Just think about that. Ants marching for days in a circle, just going round and round. Some could fit your coffee table, but most of them are huge circles. If you go to Google or YouTube and type in ant death spiral, you would see them there just walking around in circles. I've often imagined that reminds me of another species, right? And not just that it reminds me of another species, let's take it even further. Maybe they have motivational speakers among them, right? That whisper stuff like, you can make it if you try. Look at yourself in the mirror, straighten your back. When you're shaking the hand, 3 pumps to convey confidence, You can make it if you try. You can do it. You can do it. Just keep on going. Keep on swimming. And the ants tell themselves, just the next turn. Just the next turn we'll get home. Just the next turn. And they keep on going in the trance, believing, hoping that they arrive home. But when hope becomes a structure of incarceration, then what do? They die in the circle. That's the end of the story. They die. They die out of exhaustion. They die out of exhaustion. When hope becomes a holding pattern, what do? I do not speak these things from some kind of abject, self-masturbatory philosophical curiosity. I speak about these things from a place of lived experience. As an African, I know hope, and I know the sharp ends of that thing. And it looks something like Teflon cooking pans, right? I know hope. Hope comes to us in form of a briefcase-bearing businessman who tells us that what you need to do to save your people is adopt the structural adjustment program from the IMF. I know hope. It comes to us sometimes in form of a pastor who tells us that all you need to do is drop a tithe, an offering in this box or in that box, and you will by and by be saved. I know what hope looks like. I know hope and its cruel optimisms. I'm using the word of Lauren Ballant, right? When the very thing that we attach our anticipatory modalities to comes in the way of our flourishing. Right? That's a cruel optimism. Right? I know hope when it looks like an African independence movement, when we did our darndest to chase away the British people or some other colonizer. And when we did, we were like, yes, this is the benefit of hope. And we turned around and we looked at ourselves and we had become the very thing we chased away. And we were now wearing suits. And we now had a flag. And we now had a nation state. And we had become the very thing we chased away. When hope misbehaves, or actually when it behaves, it reveals itself to be more than just some innocent virtue. It reveals itself to be something that can incarcerate us and anchor us in what we already know. And that is disturbing. Because then you ask, well, Bayo, shouldn't we hope? What then do we do? Do we dismiss hope? No, I'm not an anti-hope person. I'm not saying don't hope. I'm saying we are learning slowly, and I think this is civilizational, this is speciated, this is racialized learning. We're learning that all the things we had tethered our hopes to, all the things that we had embraced as the futurity of our imaginations, those things seem to be hurting us. And it's disturbing. When social justice is restoring coloniality, what do you do? When philanthropic benevolence only reinforces the logic of capitalism, which is the bedrock of harm in the first place, what do you do? What does hope do in a world that is closed? That is the issue here. That is the invitation. That is the vexing question that I don't have an answer to, but I wanted to leave you disturbed as well, so that you leave here with a limp if you came here with a gait. Do you leave here with a lisp if you came here with an articulate tongue? That it's where the wound appears that the sacred comes in, because we're so confident in our modalities, in our methods, in our blueprints, in our plans, that we do not recognize how this forms a biopolitics of incarceration, how hope can get in the way of flourishing. Now, what's the opposite of hope? It's people say, well, if it's not hope, then it's hopelessness, right? And that's what the accommodation wants you to believe. It's only one or the other. If you're not hoping, then you're hopeless. If you're not for us, then you're against us. We are angels of good and evil now. We can no longer think with nuance. We're stuck in a switch. It's either on or off. And I suggest that there's a third way. There's a third way. And this third way is not the third thing on the menu, right? It's not caviar and other fish and beef. You know, it's not the third item on the list. It's the thing that breaks the idea that those things were complete in themselves. My name is Bayo, but my secret name is Idowu. And I'll tell you briefly what that means and why this is important here. How many of you know the country in the world that has more twins than any other country? Except you, brother. I know you know this. I know you know this. No, Daniel, come on. To students at the back. Do you? Nigeria. Have you been? You've heard about this. Nigeria and then India, right? India has, by dint of population size, I believe. But Nigeria is up there. I believe that the rate at which we produce twins is so incredibly high that the BBC and scientists have rushed down there to try and figure out, what are you guys doing as to make twins so popular? And it's not just Nigeria as a whole. I don't think in terms of the categories of nation states, but the Yoruba people, my people, they produce twins. Twins are a sacred thing to us, right? And as a result, we have twin adjacent technologies and spiritualities, ways of naming children around the phenomenon of twins. Like if you had a child and you named the child Charles, right? And the second pregnancy gave birth to twins. Now, the twins have changed the entire scene. The names of every other child that comes after the twins has to follow a ritual, has to follow a protocol. And I'll tell you what that is. Now, in Nigeria, in the Yoruba people, the twins are named Taiwo and Kehinde, okay? Taiwo means I came out first. That's what it means. Kehinde means I came out after that guy who came out first, right? So Taiwo is the firstborn, the one who pushes out first, and Kehinde is the one that comes afterwards. But in the logic of Yoruba cosmopoetry, in the belly of the mother, Kehinde is the older one. Why? Because Kehinde is the one who sends Taiwo out first. Says, go out there, see if everything is okay. If it's okay, I want you to scream loudly, and then I will show up. So Kehinde is the older one that sends Taiwo out, right? Now, Taiwo and Kehinde are the twin pairs. According to Yoruba tradition, twins are a wonderful gift, but they're also a curse. They're also a heavy, feverish spiritual burden because it means we're caught in a pattern that might repeat itself. Some families have twins, and so they're wary about that. And I said, this might be a pattern of repetition. They're intuiting the death spiral. Okay? So Taiwo and Kehinde come first. The one who comes afterwards, the child that comes after the twin pair, that is not a twin, is named Idowu. Okay? And Idowu means I came after the twins. But it means something more. Because according to Yoruba mythology, Idowu is older than the twins. Idowu is the third that breaks the count. And I'm an Idowu. Why is Idowu the older one? Because the age, the spiritual assignment of Idowu is to hold the twins. The assignment of Idowu is to embrace the twins in their feverish twinning, right? Is to hold them. We actually have a saying in Yoruba land that a mother, and this is very provocative, but this is our saying, a mother who has twins that does not have Idowu will grow mad, right? It's that something enters, the feverish force of the twin spirituality enters a community, but you need an Idowu to hold the electricity of the stubbornness or the mischief of twins. So the third is the older one spiritually. I'm an Idowu, but I don't have twins. And that's because when my mother gave birth to twins in 1981, the same day she gave birth to them, they died in the hospital. And so I came after that trauma. I'm the Idowu that was not named Idowu, and my mother didn't name me Idowu because she did not want to remember her pain, right? But I came from that. And my elders tell me that I came looking for the twins, like, where are they? And that my work then is to focus on the binaries in the world. And that's why I must be committed to the third thing. Because hope and hopelessness are Taiwo and Kehinde, and they're stuck in their dynamic looping around. The third thing is that which breaks it apart. And what does that look like? That looks like all the ways that the world is inviting us to notice the small cracks in the world. All the ways that the world is inviting us to notice that grief is not the opposite of joy. It's the adequacy. It's the joy of joy. That there's no joy without grief, and there's no grief without joy. All the ways that the world is inviting us to notice how things are mixed with each other. All the ways the world is inviting us to notice how things are nuanced and more complicated than this or that, the binaries we're used to. The third thing is the crack that enlivens everything. With due respect to Sir Leonard Cohen, who says, what did he say about cracks? There's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. I disagree. I don't think that's how the light gets in. I think that's where the light meets itself for the first time. That's where the light understands its identity. A crack is not just an opening. A crack is the excessiveness of the world that cannot be metabolized by the accommodations of our time. That the world is constantly producing us, our bodies, our identities. But as it does so, some things get left out. That excess is not hope or hopelessness. It's something else. And this thing needs to be foraged. It may look like a gasp. It may look like failure. It may look like, I'm very shy about naming it, like saying this is what it is. We can only negotiate what it is as a people. But it's not hope or hopelessness. It is something that lends itself to poetry and that calls for art, right? It calls for us to sit with perception itself and how perception itself is deceiving us and shielding what the world is doing from us. This invitation of the third way is not an invitation to abandon hope. It is to notice that even hope may get in the way of our flourishing. And it is a way of asking us to sit with the trouble. Donna Haraway has a phrase of sitting and staying with the trouble. That staying with the trouble is exactly the kind of work that the world is inviting us to do now. What does that look like? That's another keynote. That's a whole year's journey. Just to leave you with this idea that I know we have to hope. We have to hope to pay our bills. We have to hope to get by. But I want you to understand that everything on our planet is limited and has limits, even the so-called innocent virtue of hope. Hope is a form of societal justification for continuity, and it can enact itself as extraction. It can enact itself as deepened logics of harm and coloniality. I come from a land that is shaped by hope, and hope looks like giant mountains of refuse, dumped, waste. This is where the fashion sustainability world knows how to hope best. Africa is the dumping ground of hope. Africa is the underbelly of hope. The global south is the underbelly of hope, right? When we hope, hope produces heat, and this heat is transferred to places that are far away, whether it's the ocean or the Atlantic or another continent. The hidden cost of hope is that we keep on bracing and we keep on rigidifying ourselves into particular shapes, whereas the world is inviting us to losing those shapes, to become more fluid, more available for what it wants to show us. Let me end with this account of hope at the end of the world, told by a professor, a Nigerian professor, Femi Yuba is his name. I think he's still alive in the United States. I think the name of the story is The Gulf, and I think it has been sublimated into culture. I'm definitely writing an entire book series around this story. It's about the transatlantic slave trade and how 11 million Africans were taken to Brazil, to the Americas. 5 million went to Brazil. And how in the heydays of those monumental moments of theft and extraction, that those ships would arrive and they would take between 60 to 100 bodies aboard. And those bodies would be incarcerated into little boxes, little 6 feet by a few inches of box space. And those boxes became modernity. Those boxes became hierarchy, how we think about office complexes. Because the slave ship did not disappear, it became the shore. It did not disappear at the shoreline, it became the land. It gave its organelles to the land, right? Now, we tell the story that when those ships were taking bodies across the Atlantic, a certain trickster had an idea. This trickster's name is Eshu. And if you've watched Alien, the movie, has anyone watched Ridley Scott's Alien, the movie? Anyone? The xenomorph? The xenomorph is actually shaped like Eshu, right? The person who created the xenomorph, H.R. Geiger or something like that, he legendarily invented the xenomorph to look like Eshu. Eshu is hunchbacked sometimes, represented as a hunchback guy with a phallic skull that goes all the way back, right? That's how the xenomorph is. So Eshu is almost like a monstrous thing in modernity. And so when those ships came, all the other gods wanted to have their way and achieve victory. They had hope, you see. But Eshu knew that hope was going to reinforce the violence of slavery. And so what did he decide to do instead? Instead of winning against the slavers, he drugged all his gods, all the other siblings. He put them to sleep with alcohol and then he snuck aboard the ships. He went along with the slaves across the Atlantic, and he stayed with them. He didn't perform hope. That wasn't an act of hope. That was an act of following. That was an act of staying amidst the trouble. That was an act of convening ceremony, practice, ritual in the space of our trouble. It wasn't, we will make it. He didn't know whether they would make it, but he knew that something else was afoot, even in the slave ship. And somehow, his following, his parenting, his accompaniment, his act of radical accompaniment gave birth to the wonderful ceremonies we have in Brazil and around the world. It gave birth to Santeria, Candomblé, Capoeira, Rastafarianism. It gave birth to Samba and Feijoada. Any Brazilians? It gave birth to all those beautiful, delicious, exotic, esoteric realities that are contesting the rectilinearity of modernity, because he accompanied the hopeless. This is not an invitation to hopelessness. I think we need hope. If you didn't hear that, I want you to hear it defiantly from me, that I think we need hope. But there will come a time when hope will betray its political purposes, when it to tell us in our faces that I am not enough to take you to where you want to go. I can only take you here. And when we get here, I will take you back to where you started from. Hope is a carousel in an airport. It cannot take you out of the airport. It will go around in a circle. Hope will tell us to our faces that I cannot do that. You need something else. Not hopelessness, because hope and hopelessness are twins, right? You need the Ido. You need the third way, not a human being or an ideology. You need a vocation of becoming lost. You need an enlistment of a different kind of variety. You need something else. That's something else we will find out together. That's all I'll say. Thank you very much.